Well, welcome to Bible study. So glad that you're back with us today. I usually have coffee with me here at the Bible study. I just realized that this mug actually matches the logo and the color to the study. That's that's actually pretty cool, and wildly unintentional. Yeah, my name is Kevin Young. I have a privilege of serving here as lead clergy at Christ Table. We're so grateful that you are here with us for this study. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, who we are, what we do, we tend to focus all of our energies and our resources towards those who are disillusioned, disappointed, or done with the church, those who consider themselves none. But also, we find that a lot of people who are very happily plugged into a local church community oftentimes utilize us as a secondary spiritual resource, and we don't mind that at all. So feel free to visit that website, christstable.today, if you'd like to know more about us and who we are. Sign up for the email list there. Now, if you'd like to know more about this study in particular, then the URL right there, go.christstable.today/journey, is going to give you it's just going to give you a list of all the days of this study as well as the passages, but you're at the end. So I guess you can feel free to go back to the beginning and start over there, and all the Bible studies are archived there. So feel free to walk through it from beginning to end along with us. Absolutely free. And there's also a PDF study guide there that's absolutely free and no strings attached. You don't need to put in your email or give any money or anything like that to get it. We give as many resources away for free as we possibly can because we want people to be able to maintain their connection with faith and with Jesus Christ, if they would still like to do that apart from a church community. Now, if you'd like to help support us, another way that you can do that free PDF that's there at that URL, you can get a printed version of that. We can send this to you. There's information on the website, right there, as to how you can get that. It also comes along with a few other resources to help you navigate this study through the Gospel of Mark, and that helps us out there as well when you get those. So that's available to you if you want it, but if not, don't worry about it. I'm not a great salesperson. I'm just here to talk about Jesus. Now, we're working through this Bible study through a kind of mouse trap that is called Lectio Divina. And for many people who have done Bible studies or been involved in Bible studies over the years, this is very different. So if you have a bad taste in your mouth whenever it comes to this idea of doing a Bible study, Lectio Divina might actually be a great thing for you. It encourages us to rest, to pause, to listen, to reflect, and allow God's voice to speak to us in a way that might not otherwise be possible unless we do those things. So if you like to learn how to kind of do that and invite that process into your study routine, then you can just Google Lectio Divina, or actually right there at that URL, that downloadable PDF that's for free walks you through Lectio Divina and teaches you how to do it, and then gives you the tools in order to continue to practice that in your study. Now, today we are at the end of the Gospel of Mark, Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 8. So why don't we just kind of jump into the deep end here. And what I've been doing is just kind of giving you some of the things that came out of the text to me whenever I went through this process of Lectio Divina. Different things may come to you whenever you go through this. Oh, early in the morning, live, Passover week. Different things may come to you out of the text. Now, one of the things that's very interesting, you may actually notice, Mark doesn't actually end where we are ending this text today. That's intentional. It is the last day. We're not going to talk about any of the other verses in Mark. The difficulty is that there are two, maybe actually three endings to Mark. There is a longer ending to Mark. There is a shorter ending to Mark. And depending on which version of the Bible that you have will walk through or not walk through that. Some versions don't even really include all of it, or they include it in the notes. They include it where it's set off kind of to the side. Some explain it very well. Some don't explain it well. Essentially, when we go back and look at all of the history of Mark, and we look at the different manuscripts that we have in the Gospel of Mark, there is some differences in Mark here at the end. Some manuscripts, some manuscripts have a longer ending. Some manuscripts to Mark have a shorter ending, and some of them is neither. Mainly here at verse 8. So we're going to end it at verse 8. And if you want to go ahead and read through 9 through whatever the ending of Mark is, I forget what the end verse is on the longer ending in Mark, feel free to go ahead and do that. But confidence wise, we can have great confidence that Mark goes through verse 8. After that, there begin to be some question marks. So we're going to end at verse 8 in our study. And actually, there's a very specific reason, I think, for doing that I'll get to whenever we get to the end of our study today. So why don't we just go ahead and jump into the deep end. So the resurrection has happened, but nobody knows it yet. In fact, let me just back up. The resurrection has happened, but nobody knows it yet. And so whenever we catch up to the story here in Mark chapter 16, what we have is we have women who are going to anoint and spices on the body of Jesus, as was the custom. But because of all of the festivities and the rules and the requirements of Passover week and of Sabbath, they were not able to get to it until now, this time on Sunday morning, when all of that is over, and they're now kind of allowed to move on and do that. So on the way to the tomb, these women are asking each other, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? So they're concerned that they have this job to do at this cemetery, but Jesus is behind a stone. The crypt where Jesus is behind this stone that's larger than they are able probably to physically move. So they're wondering who's going to be there that's strong enough, who's going to do it. But as they arrive, they look up and they see the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled aside. And I love this. On the way, they're talking about all of this concern. They're sharing all of this concern about how are they going to accomplish what they need to accomplish whenever they get to the point where they are required and ready to accomplish it, because there is one big hurdle that's standing in the way of it that has not yet been taken care of. So they've been talking about this the whole way and didn't know that it was going to be settled and taken care of before they got there. But the fascinating thing to me, kind of in thinking about this, is that they went anyway. Right? They didn't take anybody with them. They didn't, of course, call ahead in order to say, hey, could somebody who's in charge of managing this place make sure that this is open for us, or they're on standby for us? Essentially, they just start moving, and they hope that the details somehow are going to be worked out. That's risk or faith, right? That's stupidity or courage. They go. And I was thinking about this, and I was like, sometimes the details that aren't yet put in place, sometimes the puzzle pieces that don't yet fit, prevent me from ever moving forward. Now, not everybody is like this, but I have to say that personality-wise, oftentimes I'm like this, that I can stall, that I can get stopped from moving forward because of a detail. Sometimes that detail is very slight or very minimal, and it can just completely throw off my plan. It can completely end my momentum, and I can get stalled and stuck for a very long period of time trying to figure out how to accomplish something, rather than just keep moving forward with some sort of faith or some sort of trust, or just keep moving forward until you can't keep moving forward again. And so this is what they decide to do. They keep moving forward. They keep going until they hit a roadblock that is so insurmountable that they can't move any further. But they didn't stay at home, right, worrying about the insurmountable stone. They went as far as they could and expected that at some point, in some way, it would be worked out, even though they weren't yet sure on the journey how it was going to happen. To me, there's a whole lot of illustration, a whole lot of metaphor in there for my own life, that sometimes it is important that I just start moving and let the details work themselves out at some later time. There's this great illustration in Genesis, it's 12 or 6, I think it's 12, where Abram is told by God to go. But God doesn't tell Abram where to go. He just says, pick up and go, take everything that you have with you to the land that I will show you. And Abram doesn't ask where. Abraham just goes. And God shows him where he's going along the way. Whether God intentionally hangs information back from us, or whether or not just circumstances happen, there are those moments where we need to move forward no matter what. Even if everything isn't worked out, even if everything isn't perfect, even if everything isn't settled, even if we don't have the full picture, we got to keep moving forward. Because the women do this, they experience something incredible. They see something amazing. They arrive. The stone has already been moved out of the way. And inside, in the tomb, in the crypt, they find what we assume to be an angel. Because the text says that, right? They see a young man clothed in white sitting on the right side, and the women were shocked. But the angel said, hey, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, right? Who's crucified. Yeah, he isn't here. He's risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. And I have ran through this text so many times, and all 4 of the Gospels speak of this text and give kind of some different vantage points of it, but essentially the details are fairly close to being the same, and what's said fairly close to being the same. But I've never noticed this before. I've never noticed look, this is where they laid his body. Now, I know that he shows them, the folded cloth. I remember that the angel kind of points out that this is where he was. He's not here. Right over there is where it was. But I've never read this text through a lens of like surprise and joy. Because I'm kind of thinking of this angel as being, I perceive an adult, perceive a male, older adult. Now, this says a young man, but in my mind, that's not necessarily what I see. Because when I think of angel, I think of something that is more powerful, of greater stature than I am, something that is imposing, and that brings fear. And a young man doesn't do that to me, but an older man does. So whenever I read this text in the words of angels, it's not so much like the young or like a child or like a teenager. It's oftentimes the opposite of that. Don't be alarmed. I kind of imagine this Charlton Heston or, this deep, like Sean Connery voice. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He was crucified. I don't even know why that accent is there. But just go with it. He's not here. He's risen from the dead. Look, this is where they laid his body. Like almost a command. Look, this is where they laid his body. Look where else. The last few weeks I've kind of been, just overwhelmed by this sense of my inner child, and been kind of working through my childhood and the part of me that is still childlike. And so I'm in tune, in a way, with, I guess, the child part of me in a way that I don't know that I've been in tune with in the same way or with the same intensity since I was a child. And so whenever I saw this text, I saw it for the first time down there at the end. He's not here. He's risen from the dead. Look, that's where they laid his body. I didn't read it that way when I read it this time. I read it with surprise. Look over there. That's where they laid his body. That's where it was. And I read this text for the first time through the lens of childlike joy. It has never crossed my mind in reading this passage of the angel presenting this moment in a way that is not so much with a period or an adult exclamation point, but with Comic Sans font, right? With child lettering and emotion and excitement and inflection of being kind of enraptured. Don't be alarmed. This is exciting. Look, you're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He was crucified. Yeah, I know that's a really sucky, terrible, bloody, messy thing. You don't want that. He's not here. He's risen from the dead. You're not going to believe this. He's risen from the dead. Hey, look over there. That's where they laid his body. Like, childlike joy. I don't know that we bring childlike joy much anymore. At least I don't. To my life or to my faith. And here in this text, and I think probably in many other ones that I've missed, there is maybe a call for that, and maybe even a necessity. So as the story moves forward, he presents this empty tomb to the women. And this is a surprise. What are they going to do with it? Well, the angel here says, now go and tell his disciples, including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. You'll see him there, just as he told you before he died. And so the women flee from the tomb, trembling and bewildered, and they said nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. And here we end at verse 8, and then the shorter ending of Mark follows, which is in some manuscripts, and then the longer ending to Mark follows, which is in some manuscripts. But for us, and I think probably most reasonably in my mind, Mark probably originally ended here. And I think it's fascinating that it says, go and tell the disciples, and he's speaking to the women. There's a whole conversation that should be happening here about the importance and the prevalence of women, and women being the first evangelists, women being the first teachers, women being the first ones who are sharing the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, which really pushes against many of our preconceived notions about what the Bible says about the place and role of women. This just explodes them. But he says, go and tell the disciples, and he points out, including Peter. And if you've been with us the whole way through the Gospel of Mark, it kind of makes sense to you because Peter is the one who has had a lot of difficulty with both understanding what is going on, being able to verbalize what's happening with Jesus, and even has failed and faltered multiple times through the book of Mark in his journey. And so at this point, after the denial 3 times, Peter is likely and most assuredly down on himself to a point of giving up, never being able to face Jesus or other disciples perhaps again. He's beside himself with grief, not just over what's happened to Jesus, but also his final moments and interactions about Jesus and with Jesus. And so there is redemption here. There is forgiveness here from God through the angel for Peter. Go and tell his disciples, and especially make sure to tell Peter that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. Tell Peter to make sure that he's there, that he is aware of this, and that he gets his butt there. And you'll see them there, just as he told you before he died. Like, again, I kind of hear that childlike joy there. You're going to see him there. No, just because he already told you, right? He told you this. Y'all didn't listen. You should have been listening. Listen now. It's coming true. So the women flee from the tomb, trembling and bewildered, and they say nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. And Mark ends. And this is one of the most dramatic endings, one of the most perplexing endings, one of the most odd endings, because it doesn't feel like an ending, right? Like, really? You ended here. The angel says he's risen. He's going ahead of you. Make sure Peter knows that this is happening. So the women run from the tomb, flee from the tomb, trembling and bewildered. That's scared, dumbfounded, unsure what they have just seen or experienced or what they're going to do. There's not belief yet here. And so they say nothing to no one because they were too frightened. And I think the original people who read Mark's gospel probably had the same response to this ending that we do. And it's, yeah, that's not a great place to end. What am I supposed to do with that? That tells me absolutely nothing. Are you crazy, Mark? You've brought us along through this whole story, and then you got like this cliffhanger. Yeah, he rose from the dead, but what happened? This is worse. Why didn't you just stop it at the resurrection rather than giving us this, where you take us like 2 steps beyond the resurrection, then a cliffhanger where now we're questioning everything again? What happens? So you can understand why the early church was like, this is much better, Mark. Then a little later, people were like, no, we need a little bit more of that than that. No, that's still not great. That's not enough. So much better. Y'all ruined it with your stupid endings. Why does everything have to be tied up in a nice little bow? Why does everything have to have a perfect ending? When did your life ever have a perfect ending? When did your story ever have? It's a roller coaster of chaos, right? From one moment to the next. Whenever I was a kid, talking about a kid, one of my, and my mom can confirm this, one of my favorite book series, probably my, bar none, favorite book series as a kid, were Choose Your Own Adventure books. Some of you will remember these. If not, others of you may remember having heard of them or seen them in the library. They're old. Most of them aren't great. They're not written by, top level novelists, and oftentimes the endings were bad. They didn't fit together, but there's just something magical in these books that you could, as a kid, write the story yourself. And if you didn't like the story, you could go back and you could rewrite the story and take a different path through it. And Mark's ending is a little like Choose Your Own Adventure, right? You can go to no ending, you can go to the shorter ending, you can go to the longer ending of Mark, and choose your own adventure from there. But I think it's fascinating that there was such a unrest, a disturbance in the early church and in early Christians at people being able to kind of choose their own adventure out of this. They said, no, we have to define this. I actually am quite a fan of this idea of there being, let me just put it back up here again. I'm actually quite a fan of Mark ending here. The women, trembling and bewildered, said nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. Because what I do is I put myself there in that moment. What would I do? What am I going to do? Trembling, bewildered. I'm a little frightened about what the future holds, or about what I say about what I've experienced in reading the book of Mark, all these kind of things that I feel like God has spoken to me. Did God speak them to me? Did I say them? Did I come up with them? Are they true? Are they? And there's this dialogue running in my head. And rather than the simple childlike joy of being able to kind of choose an adventure from here, and if you stumble or mess it up, you just start again, pick yourself up, take a different path. We adults have difficulty doing that because we don't want anybody to see us stumble. We don't want to admit that we've ever done anything wrong. We want to get it right the first time. We want it to be the perfect one right through it, right? And the angel, childlike joy, isn't going to let us do that. And Mark, with his no ending, isn't going to let us do that. Mark's going to drop us right there, fly us in, and drop us right there by chopper into that moment where the tomb is empty and they've been given a charge to go and tell other people, and they're just not ready to do it. They're frightened and bewildered. And we're there too in that moment. They got to choose where they went from the end of Mark forward with the story, what they wrote, and you do too. The journey from here is yours. Don't let that be scary. If you stumble or mess up, pick yourself up, try a different path, move forward in a different way. Lots of people are going to be trying to write endings for your story. Shorter ending, longer ending, because they're not comfortable letting you write your own story. Mark is the first gospel that's written. And it seems as though at that point in time, Jesus, the church, Mark was perfectly okay with just saying, hey, here's the story. These 16 chapters, here's the story. Pushing it across the table to you, the reader, and saying, you know what? Storyteller, I'm done. What you do with it from here is your story and your journey. Godspeed. And that's what I say to you here at the end of the Gospel of Mark. The journey of Mark is over. But what you do and where you go from here, it's all yours. Godspeed.